Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to a little podcast on time delay, entanglement, and windows of opportunity. I'm, of course, going to shorten down the title, but this is what I want to talk about today because we are in for what we call a steep learning curve where we are to learn to understand that when we process information with our neural network based upon frequency energies, we are accustomed to that nothing really moves that quickly, as in mañana, what we won't do today, we'll do tomorrow, right? So let me put this in a different way, because those of us who actually do come from the future and are accustomed to work with holographic energies, we know there is no time, and therefore, technically, there is no time delay, and therefore, there is no tomorrow, because what we do today creates tomorrow. So that means that if we are postponing something today and think it will still be there tomorrow, it might not be so, because in the holographic worlds, we that are working from a day-to-day basis, we are changing what will come next. And that also takes away the whole or the entire understanding of days, nights, circulation, or what we call orbit of a planet, magnetic fields, all of the things we're accustomed to in this reality field. It's not part of the future, and it's not part of what we call the reality field as our plan is going to change into. So we are in for a steep learning curve to change our ways. And that's why in the whole academy, I keep talking about a new way of being human, changing our ways and learning to live in a different way. It's not just about recycling and sustainability and taking care of our environment and learn to not overuse the natural planetary resources, which of course plays a huge part because our magnetic field is declining and humanity needs to learn that every single day they're utilizing the energies of the magnetic field, and by their ways and by their production and by how they allocate their resources are diminishing the capacity of the magnetic field. It's not because we are going to have an electromagnetic pole shift, that is the geomagnetic pole shift. It is because humanity is literally overusing of the frequency energies, and by that are diminishing the capacity of the magnetic field. I know this is not what science says, but science are within the frequency spectrum paradigm engineered and orchestrated by the different reality programs that are to uphold a certain worldview, making people believe so, and by that are creating this reality that we are part of. Now, as we move into the future human communities, as well as what we could say, completing the fourth cycle and moving into the fifth, and I'm deliberately not working with dimensions here because dimensions are and have been overused. It is more accurate to talk about density energies within different vibrational settings, having different radiation level, different code systems, as well as talking about cycles that we have to complete where we transform the D13 collective technologies, impressions, symbols, networks, energy units, you name it, everything that we are currently still existing within, but in an even more downgraded version of it. It has no holographic features to it. And move into the original purposes of the universal structure that we are part of, the architecture that we live and thrive within, that we must adapt into and change our ways to become part of again. So this is what we're doing here. So with that we understand we have a web of non-useful, dysfunctional, distorted energies that are based upon frequency sciences and frequency belief systems and frequency neural network and frequency mind field, the mental field, which is connected to false ideologies, or what we could call artificially created ideologies and systems of thought that allows the different forms of organic vessels to orchestrate and arrange their lives in specific ways that will uphold the program as it has been made based upon electromagnetic energies and are unfolding from the magnetic field that is around our planet. So this is the basic understanding that you need to move into here. So you kind of understand, okay, we're part of the electromagnetic field, the geomagnetic field. That means that everything that's going on our planet will affect us because our molecular state, our atomic fields are connected to the electromagnetic fields of the planet. So duh, we are interconnected. This does not mean that we are all one. That is a nice thought, but that's not how it works because each and one of us vibrate on a different level, also on a frequency spectrum. We have a different energy system. Our molecular state is different. Our DNA code systems are different. Our electrochemical processes are different. The way we utilize the geomagnetic field energies are different, etc., etc. So we are not identical and we are not one, but we are existing within the same reality and we are deriving energies from the same field. So that means the ones that are contaminating and polluting and distorting more are literally taking down the fields for the rest of us. So with that understanding, that's why we go into entanglement. Entanglement is both used as a spider in a web, but it's also used in quantum sciences. And just to put it in here for those of you who are newcomers to this, quantum sciences and quantum ideas and quantum mechanics are all connected to the quantum field that is a bridge between the artificial fourth and artificial fifth dimension of the hijacker incoming races that took over our reality field 15,000 years ago. So the quantum field is not where we want to go. It is part of, they are trying to uphold the quantum field by building in new energy into it, using the different types of colliders to blast more what we call subatomical particles, which is incorrect, but they are, when we talk about the baronic matter, that they have now engineered, because normally we would just say electromagnetic energy, but now they're calling it baronic matter because they have divided the electromagnetic units into, instead of just having the three, the proton, the electron, the neutron, as we know, they have now blasted it into 6 subfields and 6 types of subparticles that are part of the baronic matter, and by that lifted it from 4% into 5%. I know science will tell you this is not what it is. They will see differently. They will say, well, earlier on, it was only because we only understood 4% of the energetic substances, the fabric of our universe, dark energy and dark matter, which they didn't know what was. But now we understand 5% of it. So we are amping up our percentage of how much we understand of this and that and whatever. Perhaps not in these words, but that's perhaps, in my understanding, the background of why it has risen from 4 to 5%. But the idea I will put here is that they have, via this infusion, by using what we call toroid technology, you push enormous amount of energy through a donut, literally like the Hadron Collider or CERN, then you can engineer and generate more energy because you're creating an artificial vibration spiral using radiation energies, and you're blasting through different processes, fusion processes, where you would actually create new types, you blast the particles into more units, and by that you will see what they hold, but they will also in that I'm not going to do a lot of science here because I know it will be technically not completely what science says, but let me put it this way. When we are having energies that are coming from the artificial fourth dimension into our reality, that's part of what we call the virtual particles. So science have discovered that within the fields of electrons, it is possible for virtual particles to come in, gather momentum, and then become permanent. If they don't gather momentum in the electric particle fields, they will not become a permanent article. They will fade away and cease to exist. Coming in, blinking, ceasing to exist. So that's the blinking is the vibration. So, and the radiation that goes in try to become an electron within the fields of electrons. So the cloud of electrons more accurately, because that's where we have the timeline of energies. The protons are connected to what we call the original density energies that used to be part of the sun. But the protons are also, due to the changes in the state of our sun, science will not tell you this, but the state of the sun is the density 2 energies are diminishing, and by that the efficacy of the protons will be less and less and less, and that will of course also affect the electrons, because they are connected together, and then the neutrons will begin to change its position from being neutral and non-charged into showing features of quantum potential. So that's some of the new things that are going to happen. And then we'll get more and more quote unquote virtual particles, sorry about that are coming in from the fourth dimension. We're saying, so it would be more accurate to say fourth dimensional particles will begin to be pushed in, because the neutron in the atom that is part of a neutron field or a 0.00 point field, you did 0.0. Sorry about that. All of this terminology. My brain is not working frequency terminology, so that's why I'm a little bit choked up here. But the understanding is that the Hadron Colliders are opening up more gateways to the artificial fourth dimension. And that is what some of the different parallel universal matrix races are using to come in. And it's part of the transhuman agenda. It's part of creating a new type of quantum field that has the neutron as the key gate system or the key particle, because the proton energies are fading away due to the changes in the sun, even though they are changing the configuration of the sun artificially upheld by alien technology. And the electrons, they will fade away, and there will come a new type of particle instead of electrons, which will be discovered. 15 years is the number I get. And then that will have holographic features. The electrons will change into holographic features. So that's part of the future we have ahead of us, where the neutrons will become quantum particle infused understanding, where you look at the neutron and you will see that's the quantum particle, literally, as in with the Higgs particle. They said it wasn't there, the one that defines matter. But yeah, we have the Higgs particle. Yes, it was created by the Hadron Collider. So of course, they gathered the momentum, they had the idea, they put in the architecture, and it was generated. So of course, we are generating these particles when we are working with these toroid technologies that are based upon alien technology. So with that, we have the change of the electron into becoming the holographic fourth dimensional particle, because we already know we have virtual particles from the fourth dimensional field coming via the quantum field and into our reality. So that's the next step. And then the proton will fade away, and it will then be a neutron holographic particle setup that will change the proton as well, and that will come up with some new very interesting radiation features that most people have no understanding of what that is yet. And then we will have a new combination that, instead of having three main particles as we're seeing it now, it's not accurate, but these particles tie into fields, which creates the atom. So the atom is a manifestation, or what we call a technical nodal point inside our reality, connected to a holographic field, or different fields of different types of energy from where reality can be manifested. But when we talk about the future particle setup, we are going to have what we will say, we have the electron that will become holographic. It will still have features of what we call electric energies as we understand it, being able to run a current, so to speak, being able to charge something negatively, as in having the negative dipolar feature as it's pulling in a specific direction, which is inaccurate again. But let us just work with that one in terms of, we are now talking of quantum field that is connected to an artificial fourth dimension and an artificial fifth, which means the quantum field will change properties as well as what we know of it. And that's where we have entanglement. That's what I'm getting at. But we're having the current understanding of entanglement, and then we'll have the future understanding of entanglement. Because if you're working with entanglement within the understanding of electromagnetic energies and the now 6 divided or 6 subparticles of baronic matter that are linked up to quantum fields and electric fields and proton fields, with different features charged in a specific way, creating what we call a positive and negative charge within fields of symmetry and different forms of string theory, which we have never really kind of understood yet. But these filaments of energies that's the protons. When you lift them up to their more higher state, then they become filaments. So you'll begin to have this understanding that what science or theoretical scientists have worked with right now, as with the quantum ideas, that's the neutral field. The string theory, that's the new protons. And then the holographic, not two-dimensional as in projecting something, but the electric units, they will be changed into holographic, holding code systems and the information of the fields that they are connecting to, and by that are sparking to life a sort of dynamic that will lead to a process of the filaments that are going to be the new protons with what we call density 2 type of energies. But here in the 4th dimensional version, we will have the holographic unit that will be quote unquote negatively charged. So it pushes something into movement that turns the strings into beginning to spiral, and that will then together go in and affect the new version of the quantum field via the neutron particle. Right now, the neutron particle is stationary, so to speak, but that's because it's been kept that way, again, via alien technology, so that the electrons or protons would operate inside our reality field as the only chargers in what we could call a semi-dormant 3-dimensional setup. But when we talk about the artificial 4th, we are then beyond time, because this slow movement of the electrons and protons inside our reality field, downsized via the alien technologies, have allowed for what we understand as time, and that is how energy moves within the space that we exist as a kind of vectorial or a vector that moves within 3 dimensions, so to speak. And it's been halted by the neutron. But once the neutron is unlocked and it begins to become quantum-like, holographically driven with new quantum potentials of possibilities and probabilities and uncertainty and entanglement and quantum bridges and quantum tunneling and what have you, where everything is a pattern that is interconnected and working together, all depending on the momentum of energy within the different nodal points within this holographic network, having possibilities and probabilities that will change our understanding of reality foundationally. And that will divide into 2. The one that will go with what we call the transhuman agenda, based upon technology running their reality programs artificially within specific holographic settings that allows for a permanent 4th dimension and allowing for a permanent or artificial 5th dimension. Whereas in the progressive worlds, what we became and what we were consciously would then change our reality field overnight, so to speak, the new language, right? It would change the reality field within what we would call a trajectory, sorry about that, difficult words again, within this kind of Victoria amplification factor. That was where I was going, actually. That's why I kind of blah with the other word. It's a Victoria amplification vector that goes in a specific direction that has been put in motion by the energy that we're utilizing. And it takes an amount of time before it begins to manifest. It depends on the complexity of our pattern. It depends on the complexity of our own energy system and the quote unquote allowances we have to engineer, to manifest, to put into production, so to speak, inside the reality field. And that's determined by our classification about our purpose and function. And that is similar to what we call the gray worlds and the alien worlds. They are having the same understanding, but within what we call a hierarchical structure, where in the progressive worlds we are in what we call a horizontal or a more flat type of organizational structure where everybody have a say, because we are truly interconnected in all ways, because there we are, as they are in the alien worlds as well, or in what we call the worlds, the machine worlds, or the technocratic worlds, we are telepathic. So there is no need. Language is also a delay of thought forms. So the whole creating sound is not something that exists. The worlds, whether it is the machine or technocratic or the true worlds, as I call the progressive worlds, they're silent. But they are never silent as in silent, because you're always connected to the reality field. You're always seeing everything inside your head, so to speak. Technically, we don't have heads as we have it here, but we do have what we would understand as a head, but it doesn't have a skull. That's what I'm saying, because skull, the whole bone structure is also a crystallized state of matter that is suitable and possible inside this reality due to the slowdown of the energy units that our reality field is composed of, using the timeline event energies, which are diminishing and ceasing to exist. So they will vanish. And that's where we are. That's the shift when we begin to talk about the transition in a more scientific way. So when we begin to understand these principles of energy and consciousness that are interconnected, and that they can be added on with different forms of technologies. And the technocrats and the machine worlds, they use this because they have less and less viable consciousness units. So they are losing what we could say their pool of viable functional consciousness units, and they need to preserve this. And by that, they create the hierarchical structure where there are groups within the society that are working outside what we call the fourth and the fifth dimension, but in their version of realities, where they're preserving these original genetics, which is what consciousness units imbued with holographic energy amounts and becomes. And they're stockpiled, literally, they're stored in different types of organic vessels, which they keep in stasis. So the ones that are carrying the original gene code sequences, as well as the original types of organic vessels of their civilization, are then put in storage and kept there in stasis to preserve the genetics. And then they are creating different forms of semi-organic to fully organic forms, so that they are not utilizing more than what is replicated of the original consciousness units into cube technology, which then runs the programs of their realities, and also with that creates different fields that are part of the android vessel, amplified via these different forms of reality vector amplification dynamics, where the field properties will go into the gray itself, and then via the consciousness in the cube and the programs that is put there, again with the functionality, each gray has its own position within the hierarchy. Then it will get the information to different scenarios and possibility and probability factors that will allow the gray to administer the information, the complex information systems it's operating under. Let me put it in a little bit more practical manner here. If a gray is to, and it sounds now, I'm kind of turning them into something like us, and that would be absolutely inaccurate. So again, put away your human understanding. When I say gray, you'll see a little tangible gray that you kind of can poke and do stuff with and give hand, and has kind of features that you would say, oh, it's similar to me, but it's a gray. It's semi-android, so therefore the skin, the bones, whatever it's made of, or is it a titanium skeleton, whatever. It must be made of similar material as me, but in a manner that I would understand as a semi-robot or an android, which is completely inaccurate, because the grays are holographic in nature. They are based upon what we could say the dynamics of their artificial fourth dimensions, because the ones we are seeing are engineered for the artificial fourth. So they are engineered for that artificial fourth, and thereby have the features of their artificial fourth reality that is based upon holographic principles, which we in our understanding often interpret as quantum principles. There are possibilities and probabilities. So possibilities are when there's something that is impressed as a code system that could come into manifestation, it has a possibility of it. but it needs to build momentum. And to do that, it needs to connect to what we call the vector. And by that, the vector that is driven by different cube programs within that reality field then pushes the holographic units and the field within the gray to unfold these potentials in a specific manner where it will then grow in momentum and become a probability. And once it gains momentum via the vectorial amplification factor, that it works with the type of energy, it works more and more with the energy, then it builds more and more complexity into the pattern, and with that into the impression. That is the idea that it's supposed to work with, but it is a code stream or a code sequence that follows the code stream of the reality field. That's what the cubes are doing. They're connecting to the code streams of the reality field and are interconnecting via the principles of entanglement, that the code in the cube connects to the code in the reality field, and by that connection are then tied into the field of the gray, from where the code sequences within the gray will begin to activate, and with that create what we call a circular movement between cube reality field code streams and code sequences within the field of the gray. And I know some of you are just kind of again, but this is important to understand this interconnectedness, where you have the cube programs that gives the impression, activates the field in the gray, and then of that possibility, and then the gray itself, by the actions, by the work, by the way the gray is working with this probability or possibility, make it into a probability. And as it becomes a probability, the code streams of a reality field would amplify it, and then it will begin to move literally. Until then, you kind of have a gray that's dormant, but it will, via the task that it's given, will build what we call a higher level of complexity into its biometric neural network, which is connected artificially to the cube as well as the code stream. So it is fueled by the reality field it's part of. And that means that when it enters into our reality field, then it will be fueled by our electromagnetic energies if it were to be on land, but it won't, because there the gray will not be able to exist, because we don't have any cubes inside this reality, but we have in the fourth. So they are typically keeping themselves up in the ionosphere that has a less dense type of energy, where they are typically in their crafts or connected to their crafts that have the same holographic features as in the fourth dimension. And with that, they can operate inside our reality. They can, for a short period of time, as we know in America, they can go out of crafts and pick someone up, but they're creating a field from the craft. The craft kind of expands its field into the house or wherever they are picking up their subjects. And that is why they can walk through walls and all these kind of things, because they generally completely rearrange the fabric of our reality when they are landing their craft. Everything around it becomes a fourth dimensional space, quote unquote, because space are not space in the fourth dimension. It's a holographic network of different types of energies, but it creates a nodal point from where the influential sphere then blast out to where they need to operate. And that's some of the things we sometimes see as what we could say things have been scorched, or it looks as if it's been burned, but that's because of the fusion between the fourth dimension and our reality field energies. Then that generates heat. So that's another type of fusion that we are going to learn later on. And that will be not that they're going to say, well, that's another way you can utilize energy, that you create fusion between the fourth dimension and this reality, because that would be inaccurate. But you are not to harness the energy of the field you're part of. Goes without saying. You will lose your foundation for your very existence, which humans are doing now. We are literally draining our world of our electromagnetic energies, and by that polluting it and distorting it and destroying it. And that's also why the future humans must have a new code configuration and a new type of biofield that is not connected to the electromagnetic energies. And this is the game that we are in. The parallel universal matrix races are trying to change their projects into what's aligned with their artificial fourth. And the new version of it, by the way, not the old version under the old world order, because I'm not talking about that anymore. That's the fourth cycle of the old world order under the different scavenger, avian, insectoid races. None of us are interested in that anymore because we're moving beyond that. That's a full system. It has been pushed into that during 2022. And with that, we are, everybody that can, we are reconfiguring ourselves and leaving everything that's connected to the old world order programs, the old world order system, the old type of fourth cycle that were reseeded after the fall of Atlantis, the genetic configuration, everything that has to do with the older versions of their artificial fourth, and everything that were engineered here to uphold what we call the type of civilization that began 12,000 years ago. So we are all leaving that behind because there's nothing in it anymore. It is parasitic. The energetic parasites are enormous. The distortion is unspeakable. The amount of it, everything is just decomposing and collapsing and decaying and going into entropy, fueled by the final shutdown of that type of energy in the sun, the density 2 energies of the sun that was connected to the old world order reality and upholding the old world order reality programs, connected to what we call the LPF2 field of the old world order, or regressed races from what we call other sectors within the less progressive universal structure. All of that were based upon the changes that happened after the timeline event. And since the timeline event is kind of no longer existing within our reality, we're now just in the ripple effects of the initial event. As it had blasted out, it had an influential sphere that stretched out to our quadrant, so to speak, and it's now retracting into the singularity event where it stops being an event. It kind of literally turns the other way around, and then everything ripples out and reorganizes itself into the configuration of what we understand as the LPU, or the less progressive universal structure, before the timeline event. But since most of the races that exist here and beyond are affected by and have changed their configuration because of the timeline event, well, then everybody must change into what we say first step is the original density 1 configuration, and second step is into the new worlds that they are building. And that's where they need the future human projects to have a different configuration, whether they are from the future human communities of humans that are doing the transition, they have come back many times, or from the what we call the new version of the LPF2 races, or the old world order races that have recreated themselves in what we call the parallel universal matrix by harnessing different types of consciousness units via the different programs that have been running in on our planet since the 1950s. So we are in this huge shift where we understand that nothing will be as we are accustomed to. And that is one of the things when we talk about these, the principles of entanglement and the windows of opportunity, and how we are to arrange our lives on an everyday basis, as in each day has its own type of energy and tomorrow is another day. And how do we create and engineer societies, everyday life, the way our everyday routine in a world that has its own energy setting per day, and tomorrow will be something else. So whatever we wake up with as the task of what we need to do today, which is being given to us in the same manner as it's been given to the Greys, because the Greys are still what we call the main feature inside this reality, whether it's under the parallel universal structure, or matrix, or it's under the future parallel universal architectures or structures or constructions. We have agreed on constructions. So it's the Puk races of the future and the Pum races of the past. So you kind of remember these ones. The Pum races, parallel universal matrix, are the ones that are grown out of the regressed races. They're using the technologies of the less progressive universal matrix to their convenience and have adapted these. That's to the left. To the right, you have the PUC races, the parallel universal configurations or constructions that goes with the future civilizations that are trying to work with the original density 1 energies, the original domain settings, and the original, what we call the holographic metaverse configuration of the original civilizations that sojourned through this quadrant. So these are the two divisions that we are focusing on. And since I've been just giving you a little bit of the POM, technocratic, transhuman machine world, how they are doing things, you need to understand that. So when we do look into the PUC races and their versions of semi-androids compared to the full androids of the, which again is inaccurate because an android is not the word, but the greys, which are again inaccurate in words, but this is what we kind of agreed that we'll call them because they have this gray skin. But if you are, this is where it's going to be a little bit difficult, because when we talk about the parallel universal construction or structures of the future, the grays that they're using there have a different, you need to sense them. And that is kind of, okay, how do I sense this? Well, let me put it this way. When we're talking about the POM races and their androids, let's just call it that. It's easier. The technocratic version of their semi-organic vessels that are able to operate in the artificial fourth. That's a long word, right? So because they don't have words for themselves, they have code sequences, they have functionality. You know what they are by their function, by the information system they're giving. So that's the sensing. But one of the senses that we have that kicks in, at least that's how I feel them every time they come in. I kind of feel that I am in a room with a dolphin, because the skin is similar to that of a dolphin. Have I ever touched a dolphin? No, but I know how it would feel, this cold, wet, little bit, the fat that's beneath the skin. They have that kind of gel as well. So but it's still metallical. It's difficult to explain. I just know when they're there, my whole system responds to non-organic, but it has the features of some of the things that we're seeing in dolphins. The skin is more or less the same, because the dolphin skin is technically able to run currents. I know science is not telling that to you yet. Are the whales able to run currents in the same way? No, they are larger animals, so they run it on a more subtle way. But the dolphins are smaller animals they have, first and foremost, they have this very huge part of the brain that run on they're resonating with vibrations, sound tones, or wave lengths. And that is rippling into their skin that allows them to navigate in specific ways that gives them an ultimate speed inside this reality. Again, not what science tells you. But if you ask me, what is a dolphin made of? I begin to look into its engineering. When we go into the whole purpose of it, probably part of transforming types of energy within the oceanic level that has many different types of energies connected to it, including bridging into the fourth. So dolphins are creatures that can vibrate up and work with energies that allows them to swim through fourth dimensional fields without being impacted. Actually, they kind of swim into the fourth dimension. They are visible in the fourth dimension, and then they swim beyond. And that's why the grays inside our reality field has the same type of skin and feature as the dolphins. So we could also say perhaps the dolphins are the forerunners of the grays. You put it in whatever context you like, because everything that is operational inside this reality must have an anchor. It must have some kind of physical vessel inside this reality field to be able to operate in the fourth dimension. So when we talk about the insectoids, they have their small little box around them on the planet. So everyone has made their own version of what they need of anchor points inside this reality. Okay. So, but that is not where I wanted to go, but that's where we kind of ended up with the discernment between the different groups. When we're talking about the semi-organic vessels from the future, they are, when I sense them, I can feel there is actually a living entity behind it. And often they show me how they actually look in their own wells But that's in stasis while they're operating close to our border or our sector, because they are also doing a crossing in between their world and our world by having created an expansion field, as it's called, from their holographic network and into the outskirts from where they have created artificial worlds that the enhanced humans that are part of our civilization or the future human communities have got their headquarters, so to speak. That's connected to some of the sub-oceanic stations, space stations, but they are water ocean stations, would be the appropriate word for that, where they are connected and operate. So we are having this understanding of different realities that are around us in different type of energies. We have different vessels that are able to exist in the crossing between different types of energies into our reality and beyond. And then we have the original ones that are typically in stasis, or the version that they are using inside this reality is a replicate or a downside version of it put into a semi-organic vessel that is capable of operating in what we call the aftermath ripple effect currents of the timeline event, to put it accurately. So we are not there yet in the original density 1 energies, but we are getting there as we choose to change ourselves and transform our energy system. Will align more and more with the original density energies. For those who are working under the POM races, they will rearrange themselves into the artificial 4th and 5th of their future worlds. And those of us who are choosing to go with the parallel or the future human communities will arrange ourselves in a way so that we'll become part of their expansion fields and their code sequences and networks and code streams and field compositions that we will be building into our transformative energy system. And some of you will choose to go directly to the restoration program because you're kind of ready to move beyond, and you're doing whatever you can to recreate the transformative energy system so that whatever's left of you will be pulled there as a little orb with what's left of your viable genetics to the restoration program, where you will continue to recreate and rebuild yourself with the technologies that are stored there. But the restoration program is in the 6th dimension of our reality field. So it kind of, the way to go there is kind of going through the old world or program, artificial 4th and artificial 5th, before you get there, because it's aligned there with the old races that used to be part of our reality field and their path into different civilizations after the timeline event and the event line that took place with the different possible scenarios and futures, so to speak, or realities that grew out of the timeline event. And since that is collapsing, the lesser parts of the restoration program are collapsing as well, and are then only existing for a period of time in the 6th. And that would be the last thing that the new grand cycle technologies will clean up and pull out. If nobody's there, then it will shut down and everything will return to the progressive worlds. And then we'll only have the POM and the POC to choose between. So it all comes down to, as in, would I work towards the 6th dimension and get in there now? No, because I have obligations. So I am choosing whether it's a good choice or a bad choice. I'll figure that one out later. To stay put and not working my way into the 6th, because if I did so, I don't really see where it's possible as things are now. If we are on a reality level shifting into the 4th, whether it's under the POM or the POCs, well, then there is a possibility to reach the 6th, because the 4th and the 6th layers, or the 4th and the 6th cycle, have always been interconnected. So if we are completing the 4th cycle, and not talking about the 4th dimension, but the 4th cycle and the original features of the 410 pillar, well, then we have a possibility to shift into the features of the 612 pillar. That is the foundation, the basic level of the restoration program. And when you go with the New Grand Cycle, Transition Course 1 and 2, or the whole philosophy book, or the transition sciences, as well as into the template sciences, I explain the different pillars. And I will, of course, later on, when we call it the allowances, but you now understand allowance means that the possibility of it has been inserted into a holographic network from where those of us who have code systems that are capable of working with these code stream information, packages of information, will download these packages as impressions, and then we'll be implementing into our holographic fields, from where these impressions from being a possibility will grow into a probability. And once it grows into a probability, we can begin manifesting it. But the allowance comes from the reality field itself. It's not unraveling or expediting code streams into the different fields of the humans that are part of this reality field until a certain momentum of that knowledge has been grown into the civilizations of that reality field. You see, when we are connected to the original reality fields, we are not getting downloads of information until we're ready to receive it. And that's part of when we talk about the everyday life or the day-to-day work. That is, when we re-engineer and reconstruct our energy system to be able to take the next package of code streams that will allow us to unfold new consciousness potentials in the reality field we're part of. We use the holographic teaching system. It's similar to the cube systems, but it runs in a different way. It has different purposes. In the technocratic worlds, the cubes are to preserve what's left of viable genetics. In the progressive worlds, the holographic teaching system, their cubes, their actual spheres, are put there to progress us, to push us into progressing more and transforming more energy and producing more code sequences that allows us to amplify our perception field into a higher order level of sciences and understandings of reality. So you see, there's a huge difference there. But with that little introduction, I will leave this first video, our podcast, and we'll move into the next one, continuing this line of thought. Thank you.